All right, Michelle, thank you so much for being here with me today. I am seriously so excited to have this conversation with you. I want my audience to know who you are and just to give a little bit of a background. Like we don't know each, we've never met, right? Uh,
Right.
and I found you, like I think the divorce community, we all kind of run in the same circle. And so I was just really inspired by your page. Your page, your Instagram page is Hope After Divorce, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I just love it. I think something drew me to your page, your posts, and all your content is so inspiring.
Mm.
Having gone through divorce myself, and I just really want my audience to know who you are. So if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about your story before we get into that.
Absolutely. My story, I feel, is so just unorthodox. When every time I tell it, it's like, did that really, really happen? Did I really, really walk through that?
Right.
Um, a few years ago, I met a gentleman, and I had just moved from my home state of Virginia to South Carolina a few years prior. I didn't have any family down here. I had never been down here before. I just moved on a whim, and it was the biggest, one of the craziest things I've ever done in my life. But I settled here in a few years, just started getting my feet wet, meeting different people, and I met this young man. We'd only known each other for 3 months. But now looking back, I feel as if I was just in a very vulnerable space. Before I met him, I was the poster child for the independent single woman. Okay, you couldn't tell me nothing.
Right.
Right? I had it down pat. I mean, I can go out to eat by myself and do anything by myself. I was not afraid. But during that span of time, I just started getting really, really lonely. And I think it's a dangerous place to be in when you get lonely and you don't really have people around you holding you accountable. What are you doing? Who are you with? So I started talking, and he within 3 months he ended up moving in. Which I've never done that before. I couldn't tell my family because I didn't grow up that way. So
Like, are you crazy, Michelle?
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, eventually I did, and it was okay. Well, he and I were going to get married. So after 3 months, we got married. My family was pretty much supportive because they trusted me to move 6 hours away, and I'd done well.
Yeah.
I did have one family member who questioned, and I'm big and I'm grown, so I'm like, no, let me do me, and we'll be fine. Well, I should have listened, and I did. There were very many warning red flags up within the 3 months, but I thought maybe I can change him. There's potential there, and I can help him find the potential. Um, Between that month and within 11 months later, there was emotional abuse. There was subtle domestic abuse, and I say that because I didn't see it as abuse. I just saw it as he was angry, and he would physically do forceful things toward me, and then 11 months later he decided to pick me up and throw me on the floor, and that was it. That was the scariest night of my life, and I am so grateful that I was able to get out and that we're having this conversation today, because I know a lot of women don't get out because they're ashamed, and I was as well. But I'm just thankful. So here I am today. I believe that even though my marriage was not long at all compared to a lot of the women and men that frequent my page, I still, in a sense, understand some of the hurt and the pain, some of the shame. I think I expressed a lot of the shame after the fact. And I had the idea one day to just start putting things on Instagram. And my slogan is, these are the words I needed to hear. So these words with you. And that's where we are today. Just a page that tries to encourage and give hope to people who just don't feel like they have it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was never in an abusive situation, but what are the signs that you saw, the red flags, like the subtleties that you sort of pushed away? Like, what does that look like?
For my situation, he would say a lot of things to me that just were really like, I can't believe you are saying this to me as my husband.
Right.
I was diagnosed with the autoimmune disease years ago, and he would say things like, "Oh, you're not gonna be healed from that. Like, you're always gonna deal with that. And who do you think you are?" So it started just verbal,
Mm.
and then, I mean, physical. It just, that's as plain as I can put it. But again, the physical was more subtle. It was like a grabbing of the arm and subduing me down. So I didn't think, wow, this is abuse, but it was. And then it just got worse. His anger got worse. His moods just really started changing. His spiritual ideology started changing.
Mm.
And
Wow. Yeah, I think that's really important to say, like, what we classify as abuse, right? It doesn't have to only necessarily be physical, right? There's financial abuse, there's emotional, mental abuse, right? And I, um, in my upbringing, there were moments where you just don't know it, right? When you're in it, like when you're so deep in it,
yes,
so close to you, and then you make excuses of saying, well, that's normal, right? You want to say
yes,
that's normal or just brush it off. And
yes.
for me, there were certain situations where people would bring it up to me like, hey, that's not okay. And I would
Wow,
be like, really?
wow,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Okay. And like, when you're in it, like, you don't see it, right?
yes,
I had in my marriage, my ex had taken all the money out of the bank accounts, and
wow,
I warned a lot of moms about this who don't have control over the finances, because that is still abuse, right? It's financial abuse when you control something,
yes,
and for me, like, I didn't know, like, I didn't see it that way. I just thought, okay, this is somebody who's reacting or protecting,
mm,
right? But yeah, I mean, that's really important for people to know that those sorts of things are verbal, how it starts out verbally, right? And then that
yes,
progressed to physical.
yes.
So trying to get out of that situation, what was that like for you?
The
Living
out was,
together, right? You're married.
yes. The out was that night that he picked me up and threw me on the floor. He ended up leaving that night, and I'm being completely honest. When everything was happening, after he threw me on the floor, he spent about 30 minutes just, I mean, expressing so much anger, and the things that he said, I literally, months later, I had to reinforce that nothing he spoke over me was true,
Mm,
because things he said, they were so numbing. And I sat and I listened, and I had to listen because he wasn't going to let me go.
right.
For about 20 minutes yelling and screaming, and I'm sitting there with, bruises and my face just sore. And somehow, now I'm a person of faith, so I know what happened, but
Yeah.
he decided to leave that night, and I called the police. And then there was a woman that I was able to call who I trusted, and she allowed me to stay with her. So
Mm,
that was my out. But like I said, so many women don't get that. They don't get the out because they're afraid. They're afraid to reach out there. Well, what is my family going to say? Oh, my family already didn't like him. So what are they going to say? Who can I really, run to or trust? And I'm just grateful that I was given that opportunity. But for those who are afraid, who are listening, there's always a way, and there's so much help. I remember going to I didn't stay at the shelter, but I went to the shelter to see what resources they had for me, just in case I needed to go. And there are so many resources out there. Nothing is worth our lives, and I know that's hard to think, because you love that person.
right.
You've invested so much time and energy, and your children, are forever a part of that person's life. But it's more important for you to be there for your children in person and not gone.
Right. It's more important for you to love yourself enough to not
Yes.
accept, right, that bad behavior. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so paralyzing. What, so you know, obviously he said all these horrible things to you. What are some tools that you used, or just intuitive knowings that helped you sort of get rid of that energy and those everything that he spit at you? Like, how do you get rid of that?
Well, I believe that there's life and death in the power of our tongues. And whatever words he used to speak over me, like I said, I literally had to reject those words. And if one of the things that he said to me came to my mind, I had to like take that thought captive and cast it down. There are so many ways you can do that. Years ago, I used to write down a lie that I was hearing in my head. I would write it down, and I forgot who taught me this technique, but I would write all the lies down on a piece of paper in pencil, and I would skip lines in between each lie, or a fear or anything negative. I would skip a line after I wrote each one, and I would just write until they all came out, and then I would go back and write the truth in ink pen for each one until I was complete. Then I would go back and erase the lies, and I would repeat these new truths, these new affirmations until I got it in my spirit. You know,
Wow. That's brilliant.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah, yeah.
So you're basically rewriting, right? Rewriting the truth. And
Rewriting the narrative.
Right. There's a lot of thought work involved in that, right? When somebody, and you know, unfortunately, I'm sure he was himself in a lot of pain and had, you know, baggage and unhealed wounds. And like you said, you were hoping you can fix it. We want to fix it. And we don't realize that that's not ours to fix, right? We don't.
Yes.
And that person may not even realize when you're in this state of aggression and anger, they don't understand, right? They're just acting out whatever emotions are suppressed there, but it's not our jobs, right, to do the work. And there's so many women that think, oh, but you know, he's going to change or he's getting help, but that energy speaks for itself, right? The behavior speaks for itself. And when there's no change behavior, right, it's not. And good for you for realizing that wasn't your job to stay and fix that.
Yes. And you hit the nail on the head. He had issues, but I had issues too.
Right.
What made me, after 3 months of knowing someone, marry them? What made me, when I came from a wonderful, wonderful, I mean, my parents divorced when I was 13, but my father's always been in my life. So I knew my father's is still a good, what made me go from knowing what a good man looks like to my husband, you know? And so I had to dig deep. And I remember one of my counselors was telling me that, you know, you can't just put all the blame on him. Because I used to do that. Like, it's wrong and dirty, and I'm the victim. And I had to retell the story the right way. It wasn't just him. It wasn't just that wounded inner child in him that did all those things to me. It was also the inner wounded child in me that accepted from the very beginning that this person.
And just wanting, maybe being in a place of desiring connection, right? And not having that connection, and here somebody comes along and it's like, okay, you got, even if it's counterfeit connection, because connection obviously only comes within ourselves, right? And we think somebody else is going to give that to us. And you know, unfortunately, it was an experience that brought you, you know, to where you are today. And now to be able to empower other people that have been in that same place comes from that experience. And it, you know, it's sad that we have to go through these sort of painful experiences, but you've been able to utilize that pain, like you said, instead of staying stuck in it and becoming a victim, because you're right. And you can't change the story, right, if you don't take ownership of the story. Right. I think you've done a brilliant job at doing that page, being able to change the script. And so how does your content come to you? I know you said it's what you need, but is it in a moment? Is there something that happens throughout your day and you're just like, oh, I'm feeling this right now, someone needs to hear it?
When I first started, I would sit at the computer. Like my work ended at 5, I would come home and I would just just try to just create something. My deadline was to post every night at 9:00. I was just diligent, and things would come to me. But I would always reference that Michelle.
Yeah.
I would go back to her, and I would, yes, and I would say, what did she need to hear? So that's really my audience is me.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes if I don't get anything, I'll go back to some of my journals.
Wow.
I think that's an important part of the journey as well, getting it on paper, because you can always look back and see how far you've come. When it doesn't look like you've made traction, or it feels like you're not healing, you can look back over, oh my gosh, I was crying over that.
Right.
So sometimes I have to go back in my journal to remember. Sometimes my inspiration comes from people's direct messages, and they share their stories, and I'm like, what did she need to hear?
Wow.
So,
yeah, it's powerful. You have a writer inside of you,
thank you.
who needs to come out, and you have a gift, obviously. It's to be able to, because it's hard after you've grown out of the story, right? And you've done the work, and you're in a different place, and you're trying to reconnect to that old person.
Yes.
And so it really takes a certain person to be able to go back and connect to that and remember that and remember those emotions, right? And they're heavy and they're painful, but they're now for somebody else, right? Your voice and your message is now for somebody else. And it's very powerful. I know I actually have a book coming out, or we talked about this. I know, I'm so excited. It's a collaborative book with 8 beautiful women just writing their story. And so when you're talking about that, I can relate to it, because, I'm not, this is the first book I've ever been involved in. And it is painful. It is painful when you're in this place of, disconnecting from the outside and going inside and sitting with that, like sitting with those emotions, even after so many, my divorce happened 8 years ago. So, and like you said, sometimes you forget, but when you write it and you reconnect it at this deeper level, right? And you also realize that there's still some shadow parts sometimes, right? The ugly parts, the painful parts that come out still, even when you heal, right? We're human, and those things are still very painful. Or you have a different perspective of feeling sad. Like when I read my story out loud to somebody else, I cried. I was just like, I saw myself as a spectator reading somebody else's story, and I just felt this deep sense of sadness, right?
Wow.
Very deep sense of compassion. And that was like almost being at a deeper or another layer of healing, which is so powerful. And that's why I highly recommend you get into the space of actually writing, because somebody else needs to hear that message. And it doesn't matter how long you were married for, right? That doesn't matter. Like, you embodied this experience, you lived it. And thank God you got out of that experience. But that somebody else is in it right now, right? A lot of people are in it right now, and they need you. So hopefully, absolutely.
And that keeps me encouraged, because I remember going through that time frame. After the marriage, there was an amazing woman who entered my life literally out of nowhere. I went back to Virginia for a conference, and she was there, and I just felt so compelled to her. She's been divorced, but I just felt a pull to her. She sat with me through that season, and she would often tell me, this is not just going to be for you.
Wow.
There's going to be another person that you're going to meet that's going to need your story.
Wow.
But even for, your community here, there's going to be somebody else that's going to need our story. And so when we get to the space where we can share it, because, oh my gosh, that year or two after, I wouldn't talk about this.
Right.
Like you said, even a few weeks ago when I did a podcast, I listened, and I got up. I listened to half of it. I couldn't even listen to the rest. I just started jumping around the house and just rejoicing, because I know I've come a long way. I'm talking about it. I'm sharing it on my Facebook page. My friends are texting me.
Right.
I couldn't even talk about it. So yeah, our pain is not wasted.
Right.
It is not wasted. Whoever is listening to this, your pain will not go to waste if you choose to tell your story when it's time and when you're ready, and it will heal you every single time. And you're right, it's like every time I tell it, I just feel a different layer of healing going on. There's another, again, I said I'm a woman of faith. There's a scripture that says that we overcome by the word of our testimony. And so this is all this is. It's a testimony. It's a testament to what we were able to survive.
Right, right. And it's so powerful and beautiful because, you know, when we don't tell our story, like we sit in that shame, right? That shame spiral, that rabbit hole. I call it the divorce rabbit hole of, you know, just being in that heaviness. And, you know, it for me, certainly at first, there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of guilt because I wanted out of the marriage. And I grew up with divorce not being acceptable in this Italian culture where that was a no-no. No matter what, you stay in your marriage. And this is the belief I had. Had you had asked me, you know, when I was younger, would I ever be divorced? I would 100% say no, absolutely not. Like that wasn't even an option, right? And you get to this place where you value and love yourself enough to not be in situations that aren't fulfilling you. And, you know, you get out of the ego and this, you know, the inner critic that says you're damaged if you're divorced, or, you know, whatever your beliefs are around that, because we all have beliefs that we've carried that are not ours. And it's eradicating those beliefs and stepping into your truth, right? And once you get rid of that shame, you can be in a place like we are today, being vulnerable and putting our stories out there in the world, because we realize that, like we said, it's not about our story. Our story now has become somebody else's, you know, inspiration.
Survival guide,
right. So I honor you. I do. I honor you for being in that space. And there was something that energetically drew me to you. And I know that we don't know each other, but your energy is beautiful. It really is. And I hope to one day meet in person, but your energy and your voice and your spirit is definitely much needed in this world of divorce. And I'm just happy to be a part of it with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
They can connect on Instagram at Hope After Divorce, and that's where we will be.
That's where we'll be. And I'll make sure I put a link for that as well so people can find you. And again, Michelle, just thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a light in this world. It's really.
Thank you. And thank you for your work.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. I appreciate you. All right. Take care. Have a good one.
You as well.